supporters to show that they aren't taking the black vote for granted. And the president has tried to talk about his record and speak about African-American issues and issues relating to criminal justice in a way that shows more empathy than he did 4 years ago, in part because I think his campaign officials realize that he can't continue to be in the single digits with such a large chunk of voters and sort of expect to win re-election. And I think that's part of the reason he has been somewhat empathetic to the plight of George Floyd's family, the idea that this was an instance of egregious police misbehavior, and he is trying to separate that from the broader issues of racial inequality, systemic racism, things that the president and his supporters don't necessarily want to talk about. They want to talk about this as an isolated incident, and that's part of the reason you're seeing this inconsistency. The president can say that what happened to George Floyd was a tragedy, but he does not want to talk about the broader issues that happen in the African-American community and with police brutality more widely. He has often voiced his support for police. He said that this idea of Black Lives Matter movement is against what he believes in and against the foundations of this country. He attacked Colin Kaepernick for years for kneeling to protest against police brutality. And I think that's part of the reason you see this inconsistency, because the president's heart is not in it when it comes to addressing the broader issue of racism. It's just not something he believes in.
That's an excellent point. Total John Ellerdown, thank you both for your help and your context and reporting today. Up next for us, a reminder of how all this began and the painful history. This is George Floyd's brother.
To kill a man who you was trying to say was forgery, and you killed him for that? You couldn't restrain him in any way to put him inside of the car and take him to jail for anything and find out? You killed him. That was hatred. That was just hatred. Nobody deserved that. I'm tired of seeing it.
Beer in Atlanta, Georgia. This year will be our 10th year in business. You know, the last few years we've kind of just been cranking along in an increasingly competitive craft beer market. And then
Naglalaro ka pa rin doon.
Naka-live ako. Hindi ako naglalaro dito.
Once restaurants and bars went away, there wasn't let's scale down. No, it's like these are getting turned off. We take a lot of folks and put them on furlough, our entire field sales team. But there's been some bright spots. We've been lucky in some ways. People are coming and buying beer directly at the source in unprecedented numbers. There's nothing better for us than selling a 6-pack or a 4-pack right here at the brewery. The amount of revenue that we brought in, been able to sell beer to go during the COVID crisis, starting really around mid-March, has been sustaining for a lot of our operation, and it's meant literally keeping some people employed. This has become a new habit for people. I mean, I know people's names and faces now that I didn't know before, so in some ways it's been a great experience to get closer to a number of our customers. We decided to name a beer after the Police song, Don't Stand So Close to Me. We're in the smiles business, we're in the happiness business, and in as much as we can help provide some smiles and happiness during a really difficult time. Yeah, we take it seriously, obviously, but I feel like that's our job.
Another shot.
Yeah, shields have gone back up again.
They called for backup and none has arrived.
Very nice to meet you. I wish you the best.
I'm Lisa Suarez in London, and this is CNN.
travel the world, make sure the world travels with you. Check in, log on, and get connected with all of the latest developments at your fingertips. CNN Partner Hotels. Connected to your world.
Connect the world with Becky Anderson.
It all starts here. Changing, fighting, creating, connecting. Real news that shapes our world. Getting perspective on this region from this region. Places that many of us know, but few of us get to see. It all starts here, and that's why we're here, bringing you the world from our Middle Eastern hub.
Connect the world with Becky Anderson, Monday through Friday, only on CNN.
I'm Wolf Blitzer. This is CNN.
More images here of the unrest across America this weekend. There were arrests in more than a dozen American cities, among them Atlanta, where the mayor tried to make the case that by turning violent, the demonstrators choosing that path were undermining the more important cause.
I am a mother to 4 black children in America, one of whom is 18 years old. And when I saw the murder of George Floyd, I hurt like a mother would hurt. This is not a protest. This is not in the spirit of Martin Luther King Jr. This is chaos.
Van Jones is back with us, as well as Nikema Levy-Armstrong, a civil rights attorney and the former head of the Minneapolis chapter of the NAACP. Nikema, let me start with you. This is a version of a question I find myself asking the doctors almost every day during this coronavirus pandemic. How do we make today better than yesterday?
Well, one way to do that is to charge all 4 officers involved in the killing of George Floyd. I mean, it's really that simple in terms of letting people know that our government is serious about holding police officers accountable, as opposed to making excuses. If civilians had done what those officers did, they would have been in jail by now.
There's no doubt about that at all. And man, I just want to show, number one, there were third-degree murder charges and second-degree manslaughter charges against the one officer, Derek Chauvin, who the world has now seen for more than 9 minutes with his knee to the neck of George Floyd, ignoring his calls for breath until he could breathe no more. But it's not just what we're seeing across the country. It's not just this. I just want to put up on the screen. There's nobody here is condoning burning or looting or violence, but to look at the history here, this is just since 2014. This is just in the last 6 years. We could go back 60 years. We could go back a couple hundred years if we wanted to. And I guess that's the point, Van, I was trying to talk to you about earlier, is how do you find a circuit breaker when the former President Obama issued a very poignant statement about this. Former President Clinton last night issued a very powerful statement about this. Joe Biden has been speaking. The mayors have been speaking. The question is on the street, is there trust for any of these voices they're hearing, or almost everybody, regardless of party, viewed as part of the problem?
Well, you're going to have to do exactly what was said before. You're going to have the officers charged. And again, the reason that, the one officer getting third degree or fifth degree, I've never heard of a third degree of murder charge. And I'm an attorney. I'm 51 years old. You've got to have serious charges. If it's normal people, you get 57 charges, and you plead down to 4. If you give only one cop out of 3, a minor charge is going to plead down to a traffic ticket, and it's not going to work. You got to have serious charges. I am glad that the FBI and the Department of Justice is engaged. Chief Ellison, the state attorney general, also needs to be engaged by the governor. So you have multiple levels of engagement. That's number one. Number two, you have to have a federal bill now. Folks, you got to have a federal bill. On Monday morning, the first order of business, get a bipartisan group together at the White House or someplace else. A lot of this stuff is very well known. Some of this qualified immunity stuff, you can't sue police officers individually. So a lot of stuff you can begin to fix, and suddenly you begin to restore the checks and balances. The last thing is simply this. This discussion is for my conservative friends. If you're concerned about lawlessness, so are we. There is common ground on lawlessness. But lawlessness in the police department is what opens the door to lawlessness in the streets. And so if you want to be a part of this, send a message from the right that you do not want more lawlessness from police departments. We're going to denounce these riots. And by the way, hats off to Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms. She put it down. Killer Mike put it down. There are a number of us denouncing this to the top of our lungs about the property destruction. We're dealing with that. You step up and deal with the lawlessness in the police department. Nobody wants peaceful streets more than African Americans. Join us to have law and order in the police precincts as well as on the streets, and we'll get through this.
And Nikema, where is that in your city where this began, in the sense that if you look at the history of this particular officer, the one who has been charged, Mr. Chauvin, a number of complaints, and again, in the community saying that these review boards just sort of brush it aside. You have a relatively new police chief there who has promised to work on this. What is the level of trust at this moment that those in charge at this moment are committed to doing what you believe needs to be done?
I think at this point the level of trust is pretty much zero for the overwhelming majority of our elected officials who should have been working on this issue a long time ago. We've been protesting here since 2014 in solidarity with folks in Ferguson, Missouri, and folks in New York after Eric Garner was killed, Tamir Rice. So we've been pounding the pavement literally since 2014, trying to ring the alarm and saying that by refusing to hold police officers accountable, that our government is opening the door to the types of uprisings that we see right now. But our warnings have fallen on deaf ears. And with regard to the cop in question who was actually charged with weak charges, as you all were just discussing, this is not his first murder. He also had 12 excessive force violations. So why was he even still on the force in the first place? There are a number of killer cops, cops who've been abusive, cops who overcriminalize our community, still collecting a paycheck, setting themselves up to collect a pension, and still patrolling our streets, which makes us feel as if we're under siege, and many people are afraid. And it's unacceptable. So those same mayors here and across the country who are now on television crying, asking people to stop the violence, should have been proactive when they started to see the reports about excessive force in their own cities. It rings disingenuous at a time of crisis for them to now try to dial things back when they had every opportunity to be proactive about addressing these issues.
Nikema Levy Armstrong, Pam Jones, appreciate your insights this Sunday, and we will continue the conversation in the days ahead. I promise you that. Appreciate both of you coming in to speak with us this morning. Up next, this was a grim week in many other ways, too. 100,000 U.S. coronavirus deaths here in the United States.
Excitement builds. But her great-grandchildren never saw Nana quite like this.
Put your arms through the slots.
All right. Oh, my goodness. After 2 months. Oh, I love you. I love you. Of no hugs, 85-year-old Rose Gagnon finally got to wrap her arms around her kitties.
I wanted to cry because I couldn't believe that this was happening.
And the kids, too.
He wanted to hug Nana.
So Rose's adult granddaughter, Carly Marinero, of Rockford, Illinois, got to work.
I just thought, how can I do this? Not putting bags over my kid or her.
For under $50, she built Hug Time using PVC piping, plastic, and tape.
Oh, yeah.
But even a plastic-encased hug tugged at Grandma's heart.
My heart felt like it was going to burst.
We're not meant to be apart like this or be isolated.
Carly had a trick. Up her sleeve.
You want to know what kind of gloves you have on your arms?
Yeah, what is it? Those are livestock gloves, used for examining livestock. But the kids were eager to examine their Nana. Their fingers may not fill the gloves, but their arms fit great with their great-grandmas.
Scenes on streets across America this weekend, just one of the very grim moments the country facing right now. 100,000 U.S. deaths because of coronavirus, a milestone we passed in this past week. Just a quick look at some of the numbers here. Here's the 100,000, and it goes up like that. We're now at 100,000 and counting. February 1, 5,500 marks. April, the big month right now. The question is, does May? It's about equal. What will the final number be in May as we move on into June? One of the compounding, frustrating factors here, we're watching African-American pain right now. Well, the coronavirus also hitting African-Americans. About 12% of the national population, 25% of the COVID-19 deaths hitting African-Americans. If you look at the map, and you look at how we've talked a little bit about this before in different places. In D.C., blacks are 44% of the population, 76% of the COVID deaths. In Michigan, 14% of the population, 41% of the deaths. You see it playing out South Carolina, Louisiana, Illinois. The deaths among African Americans in disproportionate numbers to their populations. A lot of the new cases, too, also coming out of minority communities. This is the governor of New York saying everyone needs to get on top of this.
Those are not disconnected situations. One looks like a public health system issue, COVID, but it's getting at the inequality in health care also on a deeper level. And then the George Floyd situation, which gets at the inequality and discrimination in the criminal justice system. They are connected.
With us this Sunday to share their insights, Dr. Ashish Jha. He is the director of Harvard's Global Health Institute. Dr. Megan Ranney in Rhode Island. She's an emergency room physician and a researcher at Brown University. Dr. Jha, I want to start with you on just the sadness on top of the sadness. In the sense that we have talked for weeks now about the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on the African-American community. If you're looking at new cases right now, whether it's LA or New York, it continues in terms of the new cases coming forward, even as we try to fight this. I don't know the right words for it.
Yeah, good morning, John. I think there are no right words for this. The disproportionate impact on the minority communities of the U.S. has been really overwhelming. We were caught flat-footed on this part of the response too. We didn't see it coming. And now I think as we think through the summer and fall, we really have to redouble our efforts so that people of color do not continue to suffer disproportionately from this disease.
And Dr. Ranney, this is a question I've asked the two of you who've been gracious with your time for the last couple of months coming in on Sunday morning, is I always ask, are we better today than we were yesterday? Was last week better than the week before? Where are we? It's a grim question to ask when we know we're at 100,000.
Yeah, so across the country, deaths have been, by and large, plateauing, but there are certainly some new hotspots. And I think this week, more than any week, it is so important to call attention to those racial disparities that many of us in the public health community, John, have been talking about for months. We know that blacks are 2 to 4 times more likely to die from COVID-19 compared to whites. And of course, other communities like Native Americans and Hispanics are disproportionately affected as well. And it is so tied up with our country's history of structural racism, so historical injustices as well as ongoing problems. Things like the fact that many testing facilities are drive-through rather than walk-through, so not accessible to folks living in neighborhoods where they don't have a car. It's related to the fact that so many blacks are essential workers, are CNAs, are nursing home workers who have been unable to take time off or to protect their family. Lack of sick leave. So many other issues that have been tied up with COVID-19 that are also tied up with what's going on today. And so as you've said already, these two epidemics or pandemics are just so tightly woven together.
And Dr. Jha, some of the governors and mayors involved in this, having protests in those cities, have voiced concerns. If we can show you some pictures of some of the protesters out there, many of them out there, and most of them peaceful, it's important to note, but people out there without masks. Right, so, and there's been a debate, there's a political debate in this country, are masks good for public health, or are masks somehow a form of government overreach if your mayor or governor tells you you must or you should wear one? Now you see these scenes, and you have governors and mayors saying 3 weeks from now we may pay a price for this. Is that a fair point to make?
Yeah, so, John, when we've seen the pictures of the party goers in the past, it was much easier to just say that is wrong, it's going to do much more harm than good. As you see people protesting the injustices that are across our land. I obviously feel much more sympathetic to the protesters. And the question is, how do we do protesting safely? And I think masks are a critical part of it. I don't think of masks as an abridgment of our freedom. I actually think of them as a way to allow us to be more free, to get out, to do more things. And so I've been encouraging people who are in the protests to wear the mask, to try as much as possible to maintain social distance. It's obviously a very tough balancing act, and political leaders have to strike the right tone on this, but masks are important.
Dr. Shah, Dr. Rennie, our time is short this Sunday because of the other events in the country, but I'm grateful for your time this morning, and we will talk again. Up next for us, amid all the chaos, the anger, and the heartbreak, something I hope makes everyone proud. The United States is back in the business of launching astronauts from our own soil. Former NASA administrator and astronaut Charles Bolden joins us next. Coronavirus is affecting the entire country, the world. Are we ready? In the beginning of outbreaks like this, nobody knows what's happening. We're determined to keep reporting the story. These are the moments where our humanity really does shine. That's the hardest part. It's heart-wrenching. Representative to CNN.
Halo, sayang mo. Halo. Mama lang hindi mabait yan. Yung malalaga mo. Baka na sa'yo eh.
Before the Second World War, much of the German watchmaking industry was centered in Saxony. One of the most important brands known for the supreme excellence of its watches. After the war in Saxony became part of the communist East Germany, Lang as a company disappeared, and the communists bundled together all of the watch companies in the town. But Walter Lang, the great-grandson of Langer's estate in 1990, after the Iron Curtain collapsed, Walter Langdon returned to the town and revived the company. A huge task, but he succeeded. What always hits me about this watch is the dial. The dial of the watch is not a big space, so when you try to arrange the elements on it asymmetrically, you are playing with design fire. But Langdon seems brilliant.
The fact is, it's going to be a marathon, not a sprint. And we're not going to instantly get back to great volumes for travel. Travel is going to take a long time. We're the first industry that came into problems because of this virus, and we're going to be the last guys coming out of it. We just have to recognize it's going to take a long time before we're going to be back to numbers we saw in 2019. And we're very fortunate that we've
Sit. Bebe, la 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 la, chichi, baboy, ikaw, putresa. Hindi kita si mama. Kaya mo na. Mukha mo.
It's very clear last week I said this is not going to be quarters, this is going to be years before we have a full recovery.
I'm Will Ripley in Tokyo, Japan, and this is CNN.